Aqua Teen Hunger Force is a show I was obsessed with during the early to mid-2000s. It may sound like underwater superheroes, but the title never made sense, nor did the show or anything about it. It stars 3 crudely animated characters who seem like they all came from the same fast food combo. Fries, a shake, and a wad of meat from an uncooked hamburger. They live next door to their neighbor Carl, and day to day a bunch of weird stuff happens to them. Beyond that, to explain the premise of the show, you'd have to explain the plot of individual episodes, and even then, it still wouldn't make sense. All logic was cut off the table and anything could happen. Within its 15-minute format, it all gets thrown at you in one short burst, leaving you laughing and wondering what the hell you just saw. It left an impact on me that I think may have helped shape my sense of humor. When it first aired, I was in college, and when I was hanging out with my buddies, we would sometimes put Cartoon Network on the TV. I first knew it as the channel that still played all the classic Looney Tunes and Hanna-Barbera shows, which I don't think they do anymore. It's mostly original content, like Powerpuff Girls, which I also really love, and all the classic stuff's been separated into its own channel, Boomerang. So anyway, in college, the reason why we'd have the TV set to Cartoon Network was because of this show called Space Ghost Coast to Coast, which began in the 90s.
Greetings, I'm Space Ghost.
Space Man.
Space Ghost.
Beforehand, I used to catch it on occasion and was completely confused. Who is this weird cartoon character interviewing real-life celebrities?
I have no superpowers.
So your whole life is a lie.
Of course, now I know Space Ghost was a Hanna-Barbera superhero show in the 60s, and since the network owned the Hanna-Barbera library, they were able to take pre-existing characters and spoof them. So they turned Space Ghost into an insane talk show host. When he'd interview people, the interactions were so bizarre.
How's Chewie?
Chewie? Well, you know,
You and me both.
There'd always be awkward pauses, and the celebrities would just crack up. And I started realizing this is really funny, and that was my first clue that this was kind of groundbreaking in a way, that something new was stirring in the water that became Adult Swim. It was a late-night programming block on Cartoon Network. But we have to take a step back a little bit, because when I met Mike Matei, he introduced me to Cartoon Planet, also starring Space Ghost, which was kind of a spin-off of Coast to Coast, airing at the same time throughout the 90s. Cartoon Planet originated as a repackaging of classic cartoons, with Space Ghost hosting with skits between the cartoons.
You know what?
What?
That's what? Got you good, buddy.
He was joined by his assistants Zorak and Brack, who were villains from the original Space Ghost show. They'd have funny, illogical conversations and sing songs.
Don't touch me! Don't touch me!
The funniest voice was Andy Merrill as Brack.
And add butter and American cheese on white bread, boy, oh boy!
I could never get enough of this character, and I wonder why this show is so obscure when Coast to Coast is relatively well known.
You know it.
Hey!
What?
What?
Never mind.
But anyway, all this Space Ghost stuff was the springboard for me to discover Aqua Teen Hunger Force and the Adult Swim shows that came next, like Robot Chicken, Rick and Morty, and too many to count. Every show developed its own unique sense of humor and surrealism, and the commercial bumpers always made you ask, how do they come up with this stuff? It's a mind-warping experience. When you set your TV to Cartoon Network late at night, you never know what's going to happen. So when I first saw Aqua Teen Hunger Force, I could sense that it was coming at the start of something new, exciting, and weird. So it's hard to review Aqua Teen. It's a show that is so unpredictable moment to moment, but I can at least talk about the one thing that stays consistent in this sea of madness, which is the characters and their personalities. Meatwad is always lovable. He's like a child, very naive and humble, yet he's the most powerful. He can shapeshift into any object, but the great running joke is whenever he changes into something, it rarely seems applicable to the situation.
Give him the finger.
The finger? What?
No, not at all like that.
It's as if he's a young superhero just figuring out his powers.
I am immortal!
Shit, no!
Master Shake is the asshole of the group. He's always laying in front of the TV, insulting the others, torturing Meatwad. He's high-strung, always on edge, shouting about Dracula, this and that, and always does something dumb, gets himself injured or killed.
You're not even here.
Good night, Shake.
Good night.
Frylock is the only character that's smart and down to earth, which also makes you forget he's a floating box of fries. He's always kind to Meatwad, sort of like he feels responsible for him. His only fault is that he's always making scientific inventions that lead to disaster. And every now and then, whenever the situation calls for it, he shoots lasers, which is so reserved you often forget he can do it. Not like any logic applies anyway.
I only heard your little song about 1,000 times!
Their neighbor Carl is probably the funniest character because he's the most realistic. He's just an average, bad-tempered, middle-aged guy obsessed with sports, junk food, and porn. It's funny how he reacts to the weird daily stuff that happens. He acknowledges that it's strange, but he's seen so much he's no longer shocked. He's just annoyed by it. A robot breaks into his door and he's like, "Okay, what do you want? Get out of here."
Just lock your door on the what? Do what? Never mind, just leave! Oh, great.
There's other recurring characters like Dr. Weird and his lab assistant who appeared before the intro. They set him up to seem like the main villain of the show, but they never come back to him, which is another running joke. He eventually did have a bigger part in the Aqua Teen movie, and sometimes his lab creations do cross over into the main plot, if you call it much of a plot. At one point, they changed the pre-intro scenes to Space Katas, which were these real funny short segments about aliens in space getting into silly feuds, flipping the bird, and playing pranks on each other.
Did you see him?
Oh, yes, sir.
Stop the ship!
Okay, you know it always happens though.
Of course, that brings me to the Mooninites, which were recurring villains. They were like Atari sprites, which was funny in itself. This was before retro video game humor took off so much. I like it when they shoot a projectile, but it's embarrassingly slow. The whole joke was that their powers are so puny and undeveloped, but they think they're superior. They come from the moon and think they can jump super high, but when they come to Earth, it doesn't work.
Some would say that the Earth is our moon.
We're the moon.
But that would belittle the name of our moon, which is the moon.
Point is,
Any of the Mooninite episodes are favorites of mine, but just to run through some others of my top picks are MCP Pants, an evil spider disguises as a hip-hop artist and puts messages in the lyrics of a song to get people hopped up on candy to come to a warehouse to power a drill to unleash demons from hell so he can fit into society. Yeah, I can't sum it up. The more I explain it, the more ridiculous it gets. Coffee break. Interfection is one of the first times I've seen anything spoof the idea of the excessive internet pop-up ads. Shake and Meatwad are messing around on Frylock's computer, and everything they click makes another pop-up ad appear in the room until they're smothered in ads. And then they have to talk to a wizard who cons them into signing up for some kind of free trial. The first time I saw this, I just laughed my ass off. Cybernetic Ghost of Christmas Past from the Future. It's also stupidly brilliant. The ghost, which is a robot, visits and tells them this really long, elaborate story about the ground on which their homes lie. It involves a Santa ape, bones defecation, and the story just goes on and on and on. And the funny part is how the characters are all stuck listening to it and how they keep breaking from the flashback to comment on it. At one point, one of them goes to the bathroom or something, and the robot's standing there with Frylock and then fills the dead air by engaging in casual small talk. That just cracked me up. And Carl sells his house to Danzig. Danzig, motherfucker. Dumber Dolls is about a depressing action figure that Meatwad gets. It's called Happy Time Harry, but he's not happy at all. He's a bitter, alcoholic, and downright suicidal character. And through his words, he spreads his contagious negative attitude onto Meatwad, and then onto another doll, a jolly dancing hillbilly with night vision goggles.
I like to take this knife and just cut myself.
Woo! Yeah!
He tells him he's just a fraud and that he has no idea he was put in a box in a store, and gets him so depressed he blows his own head off. Damn. Total ReCarl is one of the best Angry Carl episodes. He gets killed thanks to Frylock's toilet experiment. Yeah, an overly elaborate toilet that's meant to be environmentally friendly, but instead sucks Carl into it like a vacuum and chops him up till there's nothing left but a head. The rest of the episodes is Frylock trying to get Carl a new body, and everyone fails. He uses a corpse, a remote control car, a sack of eyeballs, and a super robot with missiles and weapons before going, damn, what was I thinking?
And you're gonna plug him in?
You're right. Damn, what the hell was I thinking?
Fudge.
The funniest part is every time Carl wakes up, it's the way he reacts to his new body. He's just so angry, he wants to kill Frylock.
But try to take another step towards me, okay?
Oh, believe me, I will. I'm coming for you.
Broodwich is about an evil sandwich forged in darkness from wheat harvested in Hell's half-acre with 666 meats. It's the description of the sandwich that brings me to tears. But also, every time Shake takes a bite out of it, he gets warped into this weird dimension with a different animation style, and there's some character who tries to kill him with an axe. This one also has a great example of the abrupt ending. Shake wins a contest, gets free brain surgery, eats the sandwich, goes into the dimension, gets the axe swiped at him, and the credits start rolling before you even have time to process what you just saw. Video Ouija is a good one. Shake kills himself so that he could come back as a ghost and haunt Meatwad through this seance Atari game, but then Meatwad moves on to this insult game where the goal is to deliver the best insults to your opponent.
Bro.
I saw you looking at it. Joe Mama, you did.
Classic comeback.
Joe Mama, Joe Mama.
It's funny to imagine an Atari game like that with one button and a joystick. I wouldn't be surprised if a fan-made version already exists, but it would be really funny to actually play some of these games. So anyway, Frylock has to get BillyWitchDoctor.com to bring back Shake, and this character gets the best out of them when it comes to joking.
Just kid, dirty boy.
T-shirt of the dead. Shake steals an ancient Egyptian t-shirt from a museum, but it gets shrunk in the wash and can only fit Meatwad, who then wears it and uses its power to make things appear, like Santa Claus, who's extremely pissed off to be woken up in July. Then Meatwad tries to conjure up his own presents, but only makes Easter bunnies appear.
And all I hear from is Easter bunny, Easter bunny, Easter bunny. All right.
Then a giant egg monster appears, which mutilates Santa and turns him into Horror Claus. The funniest moment is Santa flipping out by what he's become, and one of the Easter bunnies says he could use a nice chocolate bunny. And Santa's like, yeah, that would help. So those are some of my favorite episodes that stand out. I could go on, but I'm going to have to stop somewhere. To sum it up, I think the show had an influence on Angry Nerd and internet shows in general. The short 15-minute format, the lack of logic, things that explode for no reason, the abrupt endings with the comedic punctuation, the stock special effects, the mixed styles, and above all, how it was made so inexpensively. Just do it on Photoshop is a quote from Dave Willis that I'll never forget. Where did he say this quote? Well, he said it to me and Mike. That's how I remember it. It was sometime early in the show's history when the creators made an appearance in Philadelphia. I have no proof of it, and I can't remember when or where, but it must have been in 2002 or 2003 at some bar in Philly. If anyone has a picture or a newspaper ad or anything to document that appearance, I'd really be glad to see it. But anyway, Mike and I went to this event, and we didn't know much about the show at the time, but we got into this conversation with this guy at the bar who turned out to be Dave Willis. He told us he was the voice of Meatwad and also Carl, I found out later. And when we asked him what kind of equipment or software they used for the show, if I'm remembering correctly, he said Photoshop and Final Cut. And we were like, really? We thought maybe you'd have something, more than that. And he just kept saying, all you need is Photoshop. Fuck it. Use Photoshop. And that helped encourage me to do what I do. You don't need the most high-tech stuff. Just use what you got and go for it.